And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the never-dull world of Indiana basketball. This is our 125th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 517th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, June 6th, 2019. I am your host, Jerod Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Martin takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
This week's banner moment occurred on Saturday, June 1st, when Indiana's Director of Athletic Performance, Cliff Marshall, tweeted out a trio of pictures from his first official workout with incoming freshmen Armaan Franklin and Trayce Jackson-Davis. The tweet read, quote, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. First workout with Armaan Franklin and Trayce Jackson-Davis. Thankful for the opportunity to train both of these student athletes. Excited to watch them grow in body, mind, and spirit," unquote. It's great to see Armaan and Trayce getting a head start on their physical development for the upcoming season because, as we've talked about at length in recent episodes, each is going to have to play a key role this season for Indiana to end its 3-year NCAA tournament drought. Trayce is penciled into many projected IU starting lineups, despite the fierce competition he'll likely receive from Deron Davis, Joey Brunk, Race Thompson, and Justin Smith. Whether he ends up starting or not isn't particularly relevant. What will be of vital importance is his ability to hold his own physically in the rough and tumble Big Ten so that he is able to capitalize on his athleticism, passing ability, and scoring touch with his left hand. There will be growing pains for Trayce. There always are for young big men, even 5-star big men. But he has to be a major factor for Indiana to have the kind of depth it will need to compensate for a lack of top-end talent. As for Armaan, while no one is penciling him into any starting lineups yet, all you have to do is take one look at the roster to know how important he'll be for Indiana's backcourt depth. With only Devontae Allen Robb returning as ball handlers and a decent chance that all three are in the starting lineup, there is a real possibility that Armaan could be Indiana's only ball handler off the bench. That's a clear path to minutes, even for a freshman. And Armaan will need to make shots, be strong and smart with the ball, and match up physically on the perimeter in a defense focused on applying ball pressure. Will Trayce and Armaan be up to the challenge? Time will tell. But it's a great sign that on June 1st, they are already putting in the work in the weight room to prepare themselves for what will be asked of them come November and beyond. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is the Nick Nurse of girls youth sports coaching in Cincinnati, the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club, and one of the world's most renowned bracketologists. He is also hoping, praying even, that someone this season will be able to fulfill this long, unrequited IU basketball wish.
I just want one guy who, when he takes a three-pointer, I actually believe it's going to go in.
He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your Bottoms line on this week in IU basketball?
Well, that's prophetic for one of the topics that we're going to talk about later.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll see. For me, this is a big time with, recruiting. This week has been a lot of the Indiana, junior and senior all-star festivities, and the game against Kentucky will take place over the weekend. So it's always good to see some IU commits and or recruits prominently featured in those. And so in the game on Wednesday against between the all-star team and the junior all-stars, Trayce and Armaan were the top two scorers. I think Armaan was tied for second with somebody, but good to see that those guys are playing well. They talked a lot in the posts on Inside the Hall about the chemistry that they have together, and I think that's something that's pretty easy for IU fans to get excited about when you look at those guys, and then when you look back at the junior all-stars, they talked about losing to Kentucky in that first game, bounce back with a big win in the second one, and one of the quotes from Anthony Leal was, talking about they out-toughed us, wanted a little bit more. It's going to be a lot different tomorrow. And as a team, at least, they came out and played a lot better. So as we've talked about a lot, it's certainly a point of emphasis for Archie to have Indiana guys prominently featured on the roster, and some good things seem to have come out from a recruiting standpoint, and also just from an on-court performance in at this point in June. So I guess that's all we can live for at this point, and go forward from there. But exciting to see, and gives everybody at least a little bit of taste of what it would be like to have Trayce and Armaan playing together.
And to my right, no, it is not Ryan Phillips or Coach. They both have the week off. Ryan is somewhere cursing the Padres bullpen, while Coach is preparing to see his son get married. So congratulations, of course, to Coach and the entire Tonsoni family. Instead, in their place, we are pleased to welcome a couple of first-time guests to the assembly call. Do you guys all remember when Ryan said this?
Indiana fans have a reputation nationally of being ridiculous.
Well, our two guests this week will proudly tell you, yeah, he was kind of talking about them. But here's the thing about these two hysterical IU fans. They decided to channel their passion for IU basketball into something useful, an IU basketball podcast. And look, you and I both know the world did not need another IU basketball podcast, but it has become clear since they launched theirs that the world did, in fact, need this IU basketball podcast because it delivers something we haven't had in this space: authentic, revealing, and insightful long-form interviews with some of the best players to ever wear the cream and crimson. And we are very pleased to welcome them here to our show.
From the halls of assembly, you'll hear us scream and shout.
It is Ward and Eric from Hoosier Hysterics, and that is their theme music. Guys, welcome to the show. What is making you hysterical about IU basketball right now?
Well, I'll start by saying what makes me hysterical is that song that I hate that Ward wrote is actually getting play on assembly call. I was so excited to say that we had arrived because we made it onto assembly call, and I couldn't be happier. And now I got to sit through that song again? Oh, boy.
It's just a short snippet.
And weeks of me talking about it as we move forward and keep reminding him of, hey, is good enough for Jerod.
Ooh, boy, you just gave Ward. I mean, Ward, you got to open the door so your head can fit in the room after that song being played here.
It's a physically large head to begin with. But, you know, it was funny, Eric, that was kind of like the first real creative difference we had on the show was me sending him those songs, which, like, I just recorded here on this mic. And he was like, no, we should do a parody song. So then on an early episode before we were interviewing people, I was like, well, you know what? Let's take it to the people. Let's take it to the 7 people who are listening and see what they think. And I think the jury has come back.
Yeah, and the good news for Ward is that his 6 family members said it was great.
Wrong. It was
so there we go.
Members. It was your dad. Your dad was the first one who loved it the most.
You're right, but I will say, to take it back to the question of what's really making me hysterical about the Indiana Hoosiers these days, it actually has to do with my dad, who I talked to earlier in the day, who had just listened to our interview with Trace Jackson Davis and Joey Brunk, and said to me that he now has a lot of confidence that Archie is bringing in good people to our program.
Yeah.
And I think that while, of course, the ball's got to go in the basket and we've got to prevent the other team from putting the ball in the basket, it is good to know that we've got people coming into the program with the people that Archie recruited last year and this year, and the ones that he's in on in the upcoming seasons, that we can really get behind, really be proud of. And I do think character matters a lot for a basketball team. It leads to chemistry, which does lead to on-court performance. And I think Archie's got himself a good start on that. So I am hysterical about that.
Well said. I agree. Ward, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're going to get to some subjects later, so I'll just kind of chime in on that one. When I was hearing even Andy talking about the chemistry of these young guys working together in the All-Star game, whatever AAU experience they've had up to this point, I love the idea of this roster, not just this coming season, but for seasons to come, and hopefully for all of Archie's tenure, you know, being mostly comprised of Indiana guys, because I don't think any of us would disagree that if Archie gets most of the best the state has to offer, that's going to be Final Four caliber talent in years to come. And all you have to do is look back to my favorite team of all time, Calbert Cheney's senior season, and all those in-state guys. Guys. And so how could you be more proud of a team that's born and bred right there in the borders with the few people from elsewhere, just to show we're not snobs? And so it's obviously it's all going to take longer than we want, but it is. And having got a chance to talk to these incoming guys, more good dudes on the way, talking to a couple of the guys leaving, good dudes on the way out. We do have to thank Coach Crean for that, but I think they probably stuck around because of Archie.
Ward, you're a great fit here, like in the 93 team. I don't know if any team has been romanticized more on this show than the 93 Hoosiers.
That's it, brother, right there. Mm-hmm.
It is. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about this week. The ACC-Big Ten Challenge matchups are in. We will discuss Indiana's opponent. Then we'll discuss the rule changes that are coming to college basketball next season, most notably the longer three-point line and how we think that will affect Indiana. And then we will answer your questions, as we always do. All of that coming this week on Assembly Call Radio. First, we've got to do a quick word from this week's sponsor, which is SeatGeek. Do you ever feel like ticketing websites make getting to the event difficult on purpose? It's as if they're so big, they feel like they can get away with not caring about the customer experience. But not SeatGeek. SeatGeek cares desperately about the satisfaction of their customers, which is why a quick glance at the App Store shows over 50,000 five-star reviews. Why? Because SeatGeek delivers a better process for buying tickets. SeatGeek pulls together millions of tickets from all over the web, and then they rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10. And the user interface communicates it all clearly by displaying tickets on an interactive seat map so you can see right where they are, and by using a color-coded system for value. Green dots mean good deals, red dots are overpriced. Oh, and every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's by far the fastest and easiest way to find tickets that I've found. When my wife and I want concert tickets, it's always the first place that we look. And best of all,
get some coupons.
SeatGeek will even give you $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. All you need to do is use our promo code. So download the SeatGeek app today and use the promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first purchase. Okay.
Can we get some basketball, please?
Yes, let's talk some basketball. All right, gentlemen. So I'm sure you all saw earlier today the ACC-Big Ten Challenge matchups are out. Indiana is not playing Duke. Indiana is not playing North Carolina. The Hoosiers are facing off against Florida State. Andy, your initial reaction there, and can you kind of give us some quick insight in what Florida State is looking like next year? Because I think we all know they've been pretty good the last 3 years.
Yeah, I definitely want to leave time to talk about the Northwestern, Boston College, and Rutgers Pitt game. So I'll try to be brief.
Please. Yes.
But Florida State be a little bit transitional for them. I had to go look because I had in my head that they had lost quite a bit from a season ago, and that definitely is true. They really only have two key contributors coming back in Trent Forrest and MJ Walker. I went to Bart Torvik's site to just kind of see how he had their rotation splitting out. They got a grad transfer from Ole Miss. Big guy that they've had tons of size lately. That actually drops off a little bit. It looks like going into next year, they have another transfer from Rice that sat out a year. So I think given the timing of that and the turnover in personnel that they've had, it's probably a good time to play them. Certainly Leonard Hamilton teams have been, while not great at late game fouling and execution, have been good defensively. So I think that's what you would look for there, is that a little bit different than, if you liken it to the, Marquette game of a year ago where you're, playing a challenge type game at home. They're the opposite, where they tend to be really strong defensively and have been for a while under Hamilton. So that's really the biggest thing from my standpoint. Their offenses have gotten better, but they were 10th in adjusted efficiency a year ago, but they lose a lot of their key shot blockers and things like that. So not an unfavorable matchup for IU, I would say at that point. Not a clear, mismatch based on who they have left, and not really a veteran group that's played together quite a bit. So I think that helps a little bit. I think it's not a sexy matchup from a attendance type of standpoint, just because it's not really a name that's going to, draw a ton more fans or a lot more excitement than it might normally. So that part of it maybe is a little bit, not a ton of shine on it, but from a winnable basketball game type standpoint, I would say it's not a terrible draw in that regard.
Yeah, just to jump in on that and to piggyback on what Andy was saying at the end, and not to be Mr. Pessimism here.
It's what you do.
Yeah, and I do it well. If there's one thing I can do well, it's the pessimism angle. When I read the announcement this morning, I just got sad, because there is one thing that ESPN cares about. That is ratings. They don't care about if a rivalry creates ratings, they'll go with that. They don't care about anything except for what is relevant and what will get them a good promotional hook and ratings. And the fact that Indiana University basketball isn't good enough right now to generate any kind of real interest ahead of Ohio State, Purdue, Michigan, and Michigan State, because the truth is there's 4 marquee teams in the ACC with North Carolina, Duke, Louisville, and who am I forgetting? Virginia. And we don't get to play any of those 4. We play Florida State. I know they've been good. it just shows where we are as a program right now. We've got work to do. And no longer is the name of Indiana good enough to get us that marquee game. We got to win basketball games to get those marquee games. And it just was kind of a reality check on where we are. Now I'll let Mr. Optimism Ward jump in.
Yeah, but before everybody just starts crying, slitting their wrists after hearing Eric, this is it, right? Okay, so Eric knows, and a couple of our guests now know, that I love to go back to the North Carolina State game in the ACC-Big Ten Challenge before we beat Kentucky on the watch shot. That was the sign that we were back. So you can even say at that point, we'd had 3 down years at that point. And the NC State game, we won. We got some confidence. We got our mojo going. Now, I don't think...
And we didn't just win. We came back at the end, which was incredible, on the road.
On the road against an NC State team that was also feeling like they were now on the ascent. So I don't think anybody feels like losing to Duke last year did anything for our mojo or confidence. And that where we're at as a program, realistically speaking, we need the wins just to get into the tournament in March, and then the whole stretch between the ACC and Big Ten Challenge, we just need to feel like we can win games against other good, this is like a top 25 program getting into the tournament as of late. Yes, it is.
Yeah, but it won't be this year.
But it has been.
They'll still be decent.
I think they'll be decent. Okay. I think the challenge becomes, and I don't know. I saw something where they said some of the teams ended up like, usually it's you alternate home and road. It seemed like they flip-flopped a few of those, but if you really look down the list of ACC teams that are playing on the road this year, there aren't a ton of great ones outside of Duke and Virginia. The other ACC road teams are Wake Forest, who's terrible, Notre Dame, who IU plays somewhat regularly anyway, Florida State, who IU's playing, Miami, who I don't know what you can expect of them, and Clemson. So in that regard, if those were going to be the road teams and you weren't going to draw Duke, it's about as good as you could, or Duke or Virginia. I guess it's about as good as you could do, but there's probably a little bit of truth to that, but I agree. But Ward is really ingratiating himself between his love of the early 90s team and hearkening back to the importance of the NC State game. You're like playing all the right cards at this point. So.
Yes, he is.
Also, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Eric.
I was just going to say on the NC State game, not only was Ward the one hearkening back to it, but we've talked to now Christian Watford, Cody Zeller, and Jordan Hulls and Verdell, and all of them point to that game. Like even on the same level in some ways as the Kentucky game, which came 2 games later, they all felt like that was the game that was the tipping point, which is great. I want to just one more note of pessimism because I have to. What it also does is this announcement kind of solidifies what the non-conference schedule is as far as marquee games. And those games are Arkansas, Florida State, Notre Dame, and UConn. And chances are none of them will be ranked in the top 25. We don't have that big marquee game. I think Ward's right about the Duke game last year did nothing for anybody's confidence. That said, it's still fun in the week leading up to a game like that. So I don't think we have that big marquee non-conference game. The upside is we've got more chance to rack up some wins and get to the tournament this year.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fair to have a very nuanced view on this where, you know what? It's kind of nice to have a lot of games against teams that are about where we are, that feel winnable, that are still quality wins. But it's also kind of disappointing to not be up in those marquee matchups. And that's where we've got to get to. And frankly, we just need to win like we know that we can win and like we expect to win over the next few seasons. And I think we all agree that we'll end up getting back to that point. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, there are going to be important rule changes taking effect in college basketball next season. Most notably, the three-point line is moving back. How will that affect Indiana and Archie Miller over the long run? And given next season's roster, we will discuss. Stick with us. All right. And hello to everybody watching live. Nice to see you all here. Awesome to have you guys here. Eric and Ward, thanks again for being here.
It's awesome.
Glad we were finally able to do this.
Me too. Really fun.
Yeah, this is great. This is great.
I could do without all the compliments to Ward, but, I mean, what? I can't have it all, I guess.
You know,
What do you want us to bring up your beret and see where that goes?
Can you guys I gotta take the headphones off so you can get the full beret.
Yeah.
Right now it just looks like a Kangol hat, but let's get the full.
But don't you?
Oh,
think
wow.
See, I thought the Kangol hat was a preferable thing, and now you've revealed what it really is.
It's like a poor man's Bruce Arians. That was really exciting for a minute, and then now,
Now it's a French baker. Look, it's either this, or it's nothing. So I got to try something here.
So how? So tell me real quick. How did the podcast come about?
Well,
And yeah, tell us the story real quick for how it came about.
way too much time of this guy and Eric texting angrily, some phone calls, a lot of it texting. I'd be like trying to make eggs for lunch, and I would like end up burning them because I had to get a point back at Eric, and it ended up being so many hours and so much aggravation and burnt eggs. I said, like, hey, we should just do a podcast. And I thought it would actually be a healthier, more productive, and honestly, a less time-consuming way to work through everything we had to say to each other about Indiana basketball, which was often conflicting.
Yeah, and the truth is, it was an excuse to get together because we live in LA. We live pretty far apart from each other. We both have kids. It's tough for friends to get together in any city.
It is.
And especially in LA where a 5-mile drive can turn out to be like a 45-minute commute. And Ward said, why don't we do this? And I thought this will be fun. And after one game, we went into his garage. We started yelling at each other. Well, we didn't yell at each other as much as we yelled at Devontae Green for some bad passes. And then we got really fortunate and lucky that AJ Moye, who lives in LA and coaches out here, agreed to be on the podcast. I ran into him.
That was the first interview, right, AJ?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I ran into him when Ward and I went back for a game we went back last year for the Louisville game.
Yeah.
And ran into AJ Moye at the game and said, hey, we're doing this podcast. I know you're in LA. Would love for you to be on. And he was like, let's do it. So we went out to his high school, interviewed him in some room attached to the gym. And
we literally put up like athletic, I think it was their wrestling room or something. And so we surrounded ourselves with mats to try to cut down on the echo and created our own little sound booth there with AJ.
Did you have thoughts of turning it into an interview podcast or doing the kind of interviews that you're doing now before that? Or did that interview kind of make it click? Like, hey.
It wasn't supposed to be reputable at all. It wasn't supposed to be anything that anybody was interested in listening to. It was just mostly to be therapeutic and something our dads would get a kick out of. But then Eric is really good at wrangling this talent, and suddenly we had to start, putting in real effort, doing some research, doing some homework, and being like, and after a few of them, I think we kind of realized we're getting an opportunity here to have a oral history of the program.
Yeah.
And a level of depth, I'm sure you guys read like the Bob Hamill books and, a few other of the novel, Season on the Brink type Indiana books that have come up over the years, but there's just no resource where you can go talk to a lot of our favorite players in the program's history, go deep for a couple of hours. That book doesn't exist. That podcast did not exist.
No,
and the truth is that Jerod and Andy and what you guys do, you do it so well that when Ward and I started thinking about like what we were doing and talking about the game against Jacksonville State or whoever it was, we're like, we're not really bringing anything that new to that world. You guys are the gold standard in breaking down the games. We listen to you after every game, and we didn't want to duplicate what you're doing or trying to replicate it. We don't. I think Ward and I would both admit we have just a fraction of the actual basketball knowledge that you guys have.
Yeah.
But we have
acumen is at a minimum around here.
A real minimum. But what we lack in acumen, we make up for in total ridiculousness. And we thought once that AJ Moye interview happened and then Jared Jeffries happened right after that, they both lived in LA. It just felt right. And I'll be honest, Jerod, you were so kind in supporting those interviews at the beginning with your tweets. That got them some traction. And Ward and I just said to each other, I think we got to just focus on these things. And it was really fun for us. It is just an absolute joy to do them.
Well, I mean, you could just tell, from the first listen. I mean, you guys have a real knack for getting people to open up really just getting the interviews at all, because I mean, we've tried to book some interviews on Podcast on the Brink, and haven't been able to book some of the guests that you guys have, and being able to get people to open up and get that level of insight is awesome. And really, it's interesting what you said about doing something different, because I think from when our show started, it's it's a lesson that anybody who's trying to build an audience or put content out there should take to heart. You got to be different, and you got to position yourself in a way that no one else is. And even if you don't have a lot of experience, you can still get noticed, and that's one of the reasons why we did a post-game show, because no one was really doing it. And, same thing with, with what you guys are doing with the interviews. I mean, it's such a breath of fresh air and something that was so needed. So
yeah, our initial hook was just to be the obnoxious ones. And, I think it was.
Well, Ryan has that cornered, doesn't he? I mean,
although Jerod,
dude.
You were really kind, Jerod, at the beginning, because in some of our podcasts at the very beginning, when they didn't include interviews where we were obnoxious, no doubt, you were very kind in the diplomatic way you handled that stuff versus the interviews that were a little bit more palatable.
That's right. From our first interaction, you might never have expected that we would be on the same show at some point. But, it's like anything else, though. Rather than spouting off just publicly on Twitter, when you talk directly with somebody, you get to know them and understand them. Usually you come together and find common ground and realize you have a heck of a lot more in common than you do different. So
I also have to say, I mean, I know it's silly and sounds trite, but Indiana is special. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles, and last night I was with my girlfriend on a street. We had some ice cream, and a woman walks by, a few years younger than me, with her husband. She sees that I'm wearing an IU hoodie, immediately screams out, IU! That led to a 25, 30-minute conversation on the side of the street. We exchanged numbers. We're going to get together for breakfast.
She's going to be on the podcast.
Yeah, sure. She's our executive producer. And it's just the connection that IU has amongst fans. It exists amongst the former players, too. We just talked to John Laskowski, and he played in 1972 to 1975. You would think on the surface there's very little in common with us, but that Indiana bond is special. And we have found through all of our interviews, they just love talking about their time at Indiana, whether it was Kent Benson and John Laskowski, or Cody Zeller, or Jawan Morgan, or Armand Franklin and Trace Jackson Davis and Joey Brunk talking about what will be. IU is special, and it has just been a joy to kind of explore that with all these people that are connected by that similar bond.
Yeah. It's awesome. All right. Well, we will continue this conversation, obviously, but let's hop into segment 2. We'll discuss the rules. So I'll give just a quick rundown of the rules so everybody knows, because there's 4 of them. And then we got a question. So I'll run them down. Andy, we talked about the shot clock one and some of the other ones on a previous show, so I think we can just focus on the 3-point one. So I'll read Jonathan's questions, kick it to you, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth on it.
I mean, the third one. I mean, does that need to be said? Apparently, is that not wasn't already in place?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess not. I guess they just wanted to be specific. I just
started reading
about
that one. Like, so somebody could have done this before. Is that really? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess they just wanted to be clear.
I guess.
Okay, here we go.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the assembly call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Christian. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Jerod Morse. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and our special guest host, Eric and Ward from the Hoosier Hysterics podcast. And guys, I want to talk about the rule changes that are going to be in effect starting next season. Andy, we talked about this on a previous episode of the Assembly Call. and they were all accepted. So let's run them down real quick, and then we'll dissect the most notable of them. But the three-point line is going to be moved back to the international distance from where it was before, 20 feet 9 inches, to 22 feet 1.75 inches. The shot clock will be resetting to 20 seconds after an offensive rebound. On our previous episode, I think all of us were in agreement that those were good moves. Two other ones that are also happening: players will be assessed a technical foul should they use derogatory language about an opponent's race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, gender expression, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. Andy, as you mentioned in the break, wasn't that a technical foul before? Maybe not. I don't know, but now they're being very specific about it. So
I would argue common decency and common sense would have taken care of that ahead of time, but apparently
well, now it's in the rule book. And then also, coaches will be allowed to call live ball timeouts in the last 2 minutes of the second half and the last 2 minutes of any overtime periods. Previously, they weren't allowed to call any live ball timeouts during the game. Maybe we do spend just a minute on this one, because I actually don't like this rule. I don't want coaches to have that much control over the action. I'd rather coaches be more incentivized to teach their players what to do in the final minutes than actually be able to take the timeouts. So any of you guys disagree? That rule I actually don't like. I don't think that's good for the game. Good for coaches, obviously, who are control freaks, but
Bobby Knight would agree with you on that one for sure. He was just famous for you guys figure it out and we'll be a better team even if you fail, because when it's crucial come tournament time, then you'll know what to do. So yeah, I think it's a little weak.
Yeah.
To me, it's just another person that the officials have to try to watch or potentially ignore when they're calling a timeout, which typically, even today on the floor, a guy is standing right next to somebody on the floor who has the ball screaming for a timeout at the referee, who just kind of acts like he doesn't notice what's going on. So, now you're making them pay attention to both coaches who can also call them. So, yeah, I don't know that it seems like a weird, because I think that used to be in play where coaches could call those live ball timeouts at various times and they went away from it. It seems like an odd one to go back to, because it for all the reasons you said.
Yeah.
I think there's only one potential benefit for Indiana, because let's just bring it all back to Indiana, and that is with the move of the 3-point line backwards. I'm hoping that Archie can call a timeout before anyone on our team shoots from that distance. Maybe that's how we get away with dealing with the expanded 3-point line. So well, I'm all for it.
Well, and I've got to say, I've been spoiled in the age of the DVR and watching these games. Out here in LA, often I'm picking up kids at tip-off, so I'm not starting right on time anyway. So I'm zipping along. And when we went back for the Louisville game, I mean, the amount of timeouts we had to sit through was so tedious. Mm-hmm. And to think when there could actually be something really climactic and exciting going on in those last couple minutes, and you never get more than 10 or 15 seconds of gameplay before another whistle is blown, I don't think that's going to help the enjoyment at the end of a close game.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about the 3-point line, because that's the one that really kind of caught everybody's attention. We got a question from Jonathan about this. He says, what do you think will be the immediate impact of the 3-point line being moved back to the international line across all of college basketball? Will we see a decrease in 3-point attempts, an increase in points per game, a blast from the past with more mid-range shooting? I will say that, typically in both the NBA and college basketball, when the 3-point line has been moved, attempts fall and efficiency falls in the beginning. And then eventually players adjust, teams adjust, and it starts to go back up. But I feel pretty safe in saying that attempts will go down and efficiency will go down. The question is, Andy, how will that affect college basketball overall, and specific with Indiana, a program where the 3-point line has been such an issue for 2 straight years? And I think we all agree it'll be better next year. But how do you think this is going to impact the Hoosiers?
I mean, from an overall standpoint, I would tend to agree that it'll go down a little bit, but I always view these things in the sense of, in a given game where guys are taking shots so many times is so far behind the line that it doesn't, it makes you question whether it'll really matter. I do think it'll slow a little bit, but I also think from an analytical standpoint, it's still going to wind up, from an efficiency standpoint, all the math that goes into that to me will be relatively the same. And for guys who have really come up shooting a lot of threes and shooting from that far behind the line, I don't know that it has a terribly large impact. From an IU perspective, I mean, the onus is still on guys to actually make shots. I mean, it in theory should help with spacing as guys are positioned behind the 3-point line. But if you don't have guys that can make those shots and the defense doesn't have to respect it, the spacing goes away no matter where you put the line. So I don't know that it will change what IU wants to do philosophically and where they're going to take shots. I just think it reinforces the importance of being able to find a way to have guys make shots. I don't think that Archie will change dramatically what he's doing. He wants to have guys kind of get downhill a little bit anyway. IU already has a post player like Duran, who they've shown the desire to get the ball inside to, and I don't think that gets any different. I think those things can be more effective if there are guys that someone like Duran can kick the ball out to, and you feel like they're going to make the shot. But that is the part that is the biggest unknown, more so than the impact of the actual movement of the line.
Yeah,
I do wonder how on two levels. One is, I think it's great for basketball as a whole to move the line back because I do think it'll help spacing in most conferences. The Big Ten just has to address how they allow basketball to be played, because I don't really care how far they push three-point line back. What they allow in the lane and coming through the lane is tackle football. And until they address that, I don't know if the Big Ten style of play is going to change that much. But what I am curious about the three-point line, in all earnestness, is how will it affect the pack line defense? Because the three-point shot does present problems for the pack line. It's presented problems for us and Archie's pack line, and I'm sure it will get better as it goes. But the further you push that out, the harder it is to do both things for the pack line especially. And I wonder if it will expose the pack line defense even more than it can already be exposed by giving up open three-point shots. I'm really curious to see how that affects us on defense, because the truth is, on offense, until we get guys who can fill it up from 21, 22, 23, or 4 feet, it's not going to make a big difference.
Well, and here, my instinct is that it's favorable to us right out of the gate, because as far as we can tell, we don't have those guys yet. We don't have the shooters yet. Hopefully it's going to be better this year than we thought, and these guys will continue to develop and we'll get more guys in. But in, let's say, the next couple of years, if the pack line, the third priority is to recover out to the three-point line. First, you got to stop the ball, right? And then you got to pack it in and prevent anybody from getting into the paint. And if the third priority of the pack line is to get out and contest that three-point shot, and while Archie's getting longer guys, you know, who have the reach, maybe have the athleticism, just the desire to jump out there and contest those shots, well, if there's a couple of years here while he's getting the rest of his team in and disciplined to what he wants, if it means the rest of the league's got to be taking less three-point shots or less efficient ones when they do, I think this could kind of help us catch up. One, for our pack line to get better, and two, for our roster to hopefully be able to compete on the offensive end in a season or two when everybody's catching up to the longer distance.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think offensively we're going to be much better from the three-point line next year, because remember, the biggest reason why our percentage was dragged down last year was because Juwan and Romeo took so many threes, and they were sub 30% three-point shooters, with Devontae, Al, and Rob taking the majority of them. Hopefully Jerome Hunter being in the mix, and then Demezy Anderson, who everybody is predicting is a breakout and at least should be an average three-point shooter. With those 5 guys taking the majority of the threes, I don't think it's unreasonable to think, even with a further line or a line that's further back, Indiana can be a top 100 three-point shooting team. And I know that number sounds crazy, and we've been in the 300s. The cutoff last year was 35.7% to be top 100. And, you kind of project out three-point percentages for those guys. I think that's doable. Ward, I think you bring up a good point, though, about the defense. And it'll be interesting because, yes, if the line's further back so the closeouts are longer, theoretically you would give up a few more open threes with the pack line. Does the distance make them more difficult to hit so the efficiency goes down a little bit? I don't know, but I think that's going to be an interesting subplot to watch, and I think it's more matchup dependent than anything, because when I feel bad. I don't remember who did this study. I think it was one of the 3-man weave guys, Andy, but they were kind of analyzing the impact of the longer three-point line, and said the teams that are really going to benefit from this are the teams like Villanova, not Michigan anymore because Beeline's not there, but teams that were already taking long threes. They're going to be set up to really benefit from this. And so I think that's the thing is, matchup wise, does this make Archie adjust at all defensively what he's doing? Because, in certain matchups now you're going to have to, close out a little bit further. I don't know, but I think that's going to be an interesting subplot to watch, because while I think pack line teams, when they play it well, have done fine against the three-point line. We have seen some vulnerabilities in certain matchups that you would like to see. Okay, if the team is really just hitting, what adjustment can we make to kind of shut this down? And that's kind of the big question.
And the truth is, we don't know if those shortcomings that we've seen in the pack line against those matchups you're talking about are because of inherent deficiencies in the pack line, or because Archie is still instilling his system with guys that are not really equipped to play in his system. And we've talked to many guys. We talked to, who did we talk to most recently? Jawan, who told us there is just so much that goes into learning how Archie wants you to close out on a three, how he wants you to play a screen and roll, that we just don't know yet if, when we've seen holes in the pack line, if it's due to personnel and learning or due to inherent deficiencies in the pack line. I think if you look at Virginia, you would see the pack line played pretty well, and you see there's really no inherent deficiencies. He may just be a freak, Tony Bennett, who knows how to do it better than anyone in the world ever. But I think it's going to
His dad invented it, so
yeah, he should be good at it.
He's got a built-in advantage.
Right.
I think it's probably a little bit of all that. I mean, certainly we're not seeing the pack line run as well as it can be with kind of the athletes that you need to run it, and we're transitioning, as we know, from a no defense type of system to one focused on defense. I think now some of those excuses start to fade away in year 3. I think now it's time to actually see the results. But it's going to be really interesting. How it all plays out, Andy. But I do think from an offensive perspective, I think it'll help Indiana, because I think we have some guys that are going to be able to make those shots. And I think a little bit, if they prove they can do that and pull the defense out a little bit, it's going to give our post guys a little bit of extra room. And that is really one of, maybe our biggest strength on offense, is being able to dump it down to Deron, to Joey Brunk, to Trace Jackson Davis. If those guys have a little extra room, and you maybe open up the lane just a little bit for Rob to get in there and penetrate, I think that could help get the offense to be a little bit more free flowing than it was last year, when we just couldn't make threes and everything just seemed to get bogged down.
Well, and you've discussed it a couple times here on your program, and Eric just observed it during games last year. We had a pretty good amount of open looks, and so back to your point of, if a lot of those looks are being taken by two mediocre outside shooters who are really great in other ways, but then we have a share of, like, well, maybe whether it's the 3-point shots or more of a mid-range jumper that this opens up, Archie's offense may be underrated as far as the kind of looks it gets, just because the shots haven't gone down yet.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think that the offense becomes, without being so reliant on a couple guys, maybe it becomes a little bit more free flowing, and you can take advantage of some of those things maybe more than you've been able to, in the way that they ended up playing so much last year, where, ball screens are such a big part of college basketball. You're probably not going to get away from that entirely, but that was such a huge part of what was being done. And I think if you're able to get away from that a little bit, I do agree that you can, it does open up a lot of things, even for a guy like Trace, who it will be able to face up and maybe take somebody. It gives him an extra couple feet of space between the 3-point line and the basket. But again, if they can't find a way to find somebody who can make shots, then it almost doesn't matter, because we saw so many times last year where they're just getting dared to shoot the ball. So now you're just being dared to shoot the ball from 2 feet, 3 feet further. So if you don't find that, but I do think they might be able to generate some cleaner looks and some things like that. They've just got to find, whether that's, Demizi making that improvement, whether that's Armand coming in, whether it's Devontae and Rob, doesn't really matter, but you've got to at least get a couple threats out there and give yourself a chance to do that. And I think defensively, for the most part, outside of Devontae and Rob, you've got some guys with pretty good length to be able to close out and challenge shots. So that doesn't worry me as much. I think it's the offensive side of it, to me, that things need to be proven on. And if they can figure out a way to get a couple reliable guys out there, then it becomes a little bit more palatable than maybe it feels to some people right now.
Devontae retweeted the rule change with a smiley face. Do you take that as a good sign or a scary sign?
As we discussed before, I don't think the notion of the idea of the 3-point line is just that to Devontae. It's merely an idea of where the line is. So I don't think that's a.
Hey, if Ohio State Devontae shows up, put it back at the half court line. It doesn't matter. Yeah. He's ready to make them.
Yeah, I don't think he feels confined by the line at all. So that's not really a big deal.
And when he sees Big Brother filling it up on the biggest basketball stage in the world, I don't think that does anything to make him shoot less.
You know, that is a good point, and I was actually thinking about that. I was thinking we got to get Devontae to the NCAA tournament because I really, like you saw what he did at the Big Ten tournament. I feel like he would thrive on a stage like that. You know, I mean, you need a guy that kind of has that mentality, and clearly his brother has that, where he can be in a slump, but then you get him in the NBA Finals and he busts out of it. It's a shame we haven't gotten a chance to see Devontae in an NCAA tournament yet, so I'm hoping this year we can break that because I have a feeling he could, again, we saw it against Ohio State. I think he could do well in that environment. Anything else on this topic? I'd love to. We can cut it short. We can save a little bit of extra time for the last segment to get to some questions. But do you guys have anything else? Do you want to talk about the 3-point line? No? Okay.
I'm good.
Want to talk about derogatory technicals?
Oh boy. Well, at least it's all spelled out in specifics. Now, when they issue the technical, are they going to say which one of those was violated so that we know?
Then they put the word on the scoreboard. By the way, in there though, you can still call someone ugly. You can still say they're ugly, so that's good.
That's true.
I was called ugly when I played basketball in high school. That was a fun insult.
Okay. Coming up in our third segment, we are going to answer a very sobering audience question about Indiana's recent results. And then Andy and I have some questions for Ward and Eric about their show and the many insights about IU basketball they've gotten from their interviews. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right. Good stuff, guys. That flowed pretty well. It's tough. Yeah, it's tough doing it with 4 people, but that flowed pretty well. Although when one of them isn't Ryan jumping in over everybody and hogging, 5 minutes of airtime at a time.
Hard with 3 people when Ryan's here. I mean, it's not really.
Come on, dude.
Okay. So I want to hit this one question from Tagu that basically he said, generally speaking, every year the national media project Indiana's ranking a lot lower than local media, so we always talk about them not knowing everything, not following it like we do, but unfortunately I feel like they've been more right than us the last couple of years. Should we start recalibrating our expectations?
Jerod, I mean,
it does. It does feel like a direct shot at me. So we'll hit that quickly, and then we'll go into some questions for you guys, and then that'll probably spill over into the extra time at the end.
Great.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Armand because I forgot about him when I was listing off good shooters. Man, I am so excited about Armand, Trace. I mean, Joey too, but especially those two guys. Those two feel a little bit, it's different, but it feels a little bit like the Will Sheehy, Victor Oladipo class, where it's like a little bit, it's weird to say that a 5-star Mr. Basketball is unheralded, but given how the whole recruiting kind of season went and it ended without momentum, I feel like this class is a little bit unheralded like that class was, but I feel like they're just going to be such awesome program guys and bring in other recruits and kind of bring a little bit of a swagger back that I'm just really excited about them.
Well, it's been about stacking classes is everything that as we all realized the season was falling apart, okay, but Archie's got to stack classes. So we're all going to talk about stacking classes to make ourselves feel better. But then when you start to see who's in those classes, it does start to make you feel better because I think I woke up yesterday just thinking about Rob being our point guard for the next 3 years and being like, that's
Rob.
Healthy Rob. That's okay, I can get through today because that's 3 seasons of that guy. And then these guys behind him who clearly he already has a relationship with, and they spoke highly of him, that it's I feel like that's where it's all going to end up. Rob's senior year of us all being like, gosh, I can't believe we thought Archie wasn't the guy.
And the most exciting thing for me about these guys is, our 2 best players on the court last year were Juwan and Romeo, and neither guy Romeo shows 0 emotion, and Juwan is as even keel as it gets. He'll do the flex when he gets an and one, but that's about it. And you talk to Joey and Trace, and they tell you, we're bringing attitude to the game. That's what we want to bring. We want to bring some emotion. And I think it's necessary. I really do. I think you got to have some of that on the court. I think that translates to tangible results.
It was Coverdale who said the FU. We need some players with some FU.
Yeah.
And that wasn't readily apparent lately.
Like a Sheehy. I mean, he brought that. You need
Absolutely.
You need a guy or two like that.
Which
Not
was
too many of them, but
a sneak peek on the Cody interview. Wasn't it Cody who said how chill Will was? Like you wouldn't even know Will was in the room.
Yeah, the opposite of Vic.
Yeah. And it just like on the court, you'd be like, oh, like I loved Will because he was on our team, but as an opponent, I'd be like, man, that guy's obnoxious. And I would think you would be like that if you saw him at Knicks, but apparently he was the most laid back dude.
Yeah, but on the court, an assassin. I mean, just a guy who went after it.
It's funny how some people's personalities almost do a 180, when they get in the arena. Some people are obviously exactly how they are, but other guys are a lot different once they get out there.
Totally.
I was like a spaz on and off the court, me. 100% spaz. You get the same guy.
Consistent.
All right, so let's hop in. Let's do this. So we have – I got to do some math here so I know when we need to get out. Okay, so as we're doing this, we have kind of a hard out because we have 50 minutes for the radio. So if you hear this,
we're out of here. I got to go.
Nope, not that one. If you hear this,
that's it. We're done. No more questions.
That means I got to cut off whoever's talking and then just go into the close and then we'll pick it up afterwards. But
Can you send me that cue and I'll use it when Ward and I do podcasts?
Sure. That's it. We're done.
And,
no more questions.
And Jerod will usually put the time in the thing. So do you know how much we have left? Then at least
cool.
Yeah. We've got 13 minutes and 12 seconds for this segment. So
this is fun. I'm having a blast.
It is fun. It is fun.
I'm just glad I don't have to edit this when it's over.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, the nice thing is, like, we don't have to end up doing very much editing with it, because I record with Audio Hijack while we're doing it. So we shouldn't have to do. We don't usually have to do much editing, which is nice.
This part of the we doesn't have to do any of the editing, but
yeah.
So Jared's basically streamlined it, so he has to do as little work as possible because he knows he's the one that's going to have to do it. So that's a powerful motivator, really.
Makes sense.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, because we know Ryan's not going to do it. Okay, here we go. Although he promises he's going to learn how to host one of these days.
Believe it when I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of which, I can do that Thursday night that you emailed me about before I forget to tell you.
You can do it?
Yeah, I didn't think we had anything going on, but I'm hesitant to commit to that before I actually check and make sure that
cool.
It's not just me thinking we don't have anything going on, but we do. So
always good to confirm that.
I'm good for that one.
Okay. All right, let's hop in and do this. Here we go.
This is Tim Priller, and I never miss an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thank you, Tim. Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ward and Eric from Hoosier Hysterics, our special guest hosts for the week. Remember that you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason, and then after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. All right, it is time for our mailbag. These questions submitted via Twitter or in our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. So we got one from our buddy Tagu, and he says, generally speaking, every year national media project Indiana's ranking a lot lower than local media. That has certainly been the case the last couple of years. So we always talk about them not knowing everything like us and not following as much as we do, but unfortunately, I feel like they've been more right than us the last couple of years. Should we start recalibrating our expectations and set the realistic goal versus our hopeful goal? Andy, you want to take the first stab at this?
Well, as I mentioned before, I felt this was a direct shot at you, and not sure whether it was Ryan sending it in under an assumed name or this is a legitimate question. But I think it's hard because I think after the last handful of years, I think IU fans want to be optimistic, and you, as we've talked about, you allow yourself to be hopeful and talk yourself into the idealized version of every single guy and the vision of what that can be when they come together. I think that's partly just people starving for the success that everybody wants to have. And so you allow yourself over a lengthy offseason to talk yourself into it and do some of those kinds of things. So I do think it's a fair criticism, but I think it's one born out of hope or wanting, maybe even more so than, hey, I know more than this guy because I follow it more closely. I think everybody just wants that to happen, which I think speaks to the overall temperature of the fan base as much as it does anything else.
Yeah. I mean, Ward, I think you can relate with me on this. Like, I always talk myself into the idealized version of every team. And it's like, well, when Josh Newkirk develops this and, so like, it's like every year you go into it and you think of all the things all the question marks being answered in the affirmative. And it's like, holy crap, we could be really good. What I think is going to happen for me this year is I'm finally going to like be realistic and say, okay, let's say 50% of the questions are answered or even less. And I'm hoping almost that I'll be a little bit more pessimistic heading into this season, and then the results will, kind of overcome that, because I think I've just been beaten down by the last couple of years.
Pessimistic to like reverse jinx yourself, which is in some way continuing to be optimistic.
Also, really easy for me to say in June, but
yeah, when we come and we go through the schedule and you pick IU to win every game, then we'll have a different conversation.
Yeah, no.
I think it is the duty of IU fans to think we are better than we are until we are that good. As soon as we start accepting that we are a mediocre program, which I think there's a lot of arguments we have been for the last 20 years, then that's the only thing keeping us elite right now is us and our expectations. And that as long as we keep saying, no, we deserve to be a top 10 program season in and season out with a chance of going to the Final Four most years, even if it doesn't happen, at least we do have a chance. If we're just like, yeah, no, we'll be lucky to make it in the top 25 and sneak into the tournament this year. As soon as we're all okay with that, the whole program's in real trouble for the long term.
Hey, Ward. If we sneak into the NCAA tournament this year and are on the borderline of top 25, you will be ecstatic.
I'll go streaking.
Yeah. So let's just back it up a little. I know what you mean, though. You don't want that to be the expectation every year.
Yeah. But look, I think it's easy this year to temper expectations, and I'll try to take that trip with you, Jerod, because yes, Eric and I were talking about how this was the deepest this last season. We said with the straight face to each other, we thought this was the deepest team since Calvert Cheney's senior year. We meant it. It's so
deep.
Insane.
If everybody had been healthy, it could have been pretty deep.
Yeah.
But it does seem ridiculous now.
But also the question, I have to say, I don't have any empirical evidence on this, but the idea that local guys overrank their team is probably an argument that could be made for every local guy out there. Yeah. I don't think that's native to Indiana. I think that is, you're covering your own team. So you know more about your own team. You see the potential. Like Andy said, you want to see potential. You don't want to see despair or what the hell are you doing?
And there's more clicks if people feel good about what you're writing.
This is true. Okay, so I got we have a couple questions for you guys about your show and just some of the things that you've learned. And, we'll only be able to get a few, to a few of them here on this segment, but we'll do more. So if this gets cut off and you don't get to hear some of the answers, go check out YouTube, because we'll be talking after we finish recording. Here's the first question that I want to ask you guys. Besides the fact that Tom Crean didn't believe in scheduling practices, which is unbelievable still, what revelation that you've heard during an interview has shocked you the most?
Wow. Ward, I'll start. I just a couple of them. The first one was that we had a real chance to hire John Beilein. Yeah. That came up in our interview with Jeff Rabjohns, and that there was a real chance to hire Jeff Beilein.
John's
was
brother?
Shocking. What?
Jeff Beilein?
Jeff Beilein?
When we couldn't get John, we had a shot at Jeff.
Yeah, let's go for Jeff Beilein. By the way, I would have preferred Jeff Beilein. I think that one. And I don't want to call this a revelation, but something that surprised me how important it is to so many of the former players that we've talked to. They really want a former IU player on that staff. Mm-hmm. And how important that is to many players, and not just ones that have a vested interest in it, like ones that are current assistant coaches somewhere else, but it's a fairly universal theme that we've heard. I can only speak to who we've talked to, but the idea that, Duke has done this, Roy Williams has done this, and these top programs that have these long histories have done this, that is something that is really important to them. And I don't want to make that like a shot against Archie, because almost universally the players we've talked to have raved some level of raving about Archie and really like what he's doing and really believe in him. But not having an IU guy on the actual staff, and Derek Elston's doing a great job, but he's not an assistant coach. That item is really important to a lot of former players as a way to bridge the gap between the history of Indiana and the current and the future.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Ward, what about you?
I'd say the most shocking revelation is that Archie Miller has a sense of humor. Because you would not get it from his press conferences or when he was introduced to the program. And there was some debate, and Eric felt like
this debate is not settled.
I feel like, look, and we've told it on the podcast too many times, but for your listeners, we went to a game in Southport where Trace Jackson Davis was taking on Keon Brooks after the Louisville game, and Archie was there, Izzo was there, Calipari was there, and Calipari was making Archie laugh hysterically. And it was the first sign that he had a sense of humor coming or going, right? Like, okay, well, if he hears something funny, he will react to it with laughter. But now we heard from Joey, put it out there. Juwan confirmed it, that he, in fact, has a sense of humor. In the sense I get, it's more like kind of a ball-busting sense of humor, like making fun of Juwan of being a 6'8", like that's kind of where it comes from. But the reason, well, you know why it was shocking, because we've all seen his public persona, but why I think it's important is in recruiting. You see these guys like Self and Calipari, Izzo, they've got this charisma. And I can't help but think that's part of the game they have to play, especially when you don't have the resume yet, which Archie does not. So how are you going to get these guys to come to you instead of these guys who have this charisma and these incredible Hall of Fame resumes? It helps if you make them laugh. That's how I would feel as an 18-year-old kid.
Good one.
All right. So one of the things I wanted to know, there was a couple of things, and we could probably fit this one in. So as you talk to guys that just left, like Juwan and Zach, and then you've talked to the incoming guys in Trace, Armand, and Joey, we took like a one question break from the optimism, but what do you take away from those conversations that maybe should make people feel good, or the thing that maybe you walked away feeling the best about from talking to those guys as you look a year or two into the future?
So quick, I'm going to do two quick ones. I will say the fire in the belly that these new guys have coming in is just, I don't think it can be overstated. I think that is something to be really excited about, and how good, they're just good people. And I think that's something to be excited about. But this might be in the shocking revelation too. The other thing that we have heard over and over again, I think Ward is probably thinking the same thing with me, is the optimism on Demezi.
Yeah.
I mean, we have heard it from Zach McRoberts. We've heard it from Juwan Morgan. We heard it from Joey and Trace. There is a lot of optimism within the people in the program, and from conversations I've had with other people connected to the program. Like when there was all the talk about who's going to transfer and all that, Demezi's name was not one of the names mentioned from the people that actually knew. The staff loves him. He loves being at Indiana. He went to Zach McRoberts and said, how do I be like you? How do I just bust my butt? And Zach kind of took him under his wing a little. Juwan talks about the intensity that he has. That to me is something to be really excited about, because I think where college sports separate themselves is when you have a 4-year player that you can watch grow and evolve. There is nothing better than, I know he was a 3-year player, but there was nothing better than watching Victor Oladipo's progression. That was so much fun as a fan to see that, to watch Christian Watford's progression, Jordan Hull's progression, Juwan Morgan's progression from a freshman who could barely sniff the court. And I think that the idea that Demezi may have it in him to be that guy, and I'm not expecting him to be a primary player this year, but improvement where he can make a difference and impact the game, and then what that means for the next 2 years, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah.
Where I see the optimism coming, not just for the coming season, but for the future, where Eric and we discussed that we want to grow old with Archie. He's around our age, and we want this to be like, yes, let's all grow old in the new era, glory era of IU basketball. And we all know what Coach Knight had to say about Archie when he was hired, that he can coach. So right there, that should quell us all for another season or two until he has his guys in place. But more recently, we had the great pleasure of doing an interview with Jeff Van Gundy, and a guy who's really watching the absolute best basketball players and coaches in the world night in and night out, having been one himself as well. And he says the same thing. This guy can coach. So to me, that's what's going to make the difference of us growing old together or not is yes, he needs to get his guys in. And then when his systems are in and everybody knows what to expect and the whole state, the coaches, the parents know they can send him in there and what exactly is going to happen on and off the court, I think we're going to be in good shape for a real long time. It's just so hard to fully believe it after the last 20 years and not having seen any results on the court yet.
Yep.
That's it.
Right.
We're done. No more questions.
Great job, guys. We'll pick this up afterwards. That's going to do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk with you again next Thursday night. Until then,
take it from me, Jordan Halls. Keep your elbow in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right.
Awesome.
Nice job, guys.
Fun. Thanks for having us.
That was good stuff. No, this was awesome. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
Pleasure.
Yeah. The Demezy thing was definitely what as I listened to him, I was like, yeah, I don't know, but I think it's one of those where a guy just such a transition in role and level of play and everything else where he just kind of was shell shocked and seems to have a good attitude based on what everybody said. So
and we talked about it a couple times.
Swing guy, skill, whatever, if he can really come out and be able to score and provide some offense off the bench.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting is it's not like you guys said, "Hey, what do you think of Demezy?"
No,
it came up unprompted
each time.
Yeah, and Andy, we talked several times this past season. They would do, they would post an interview with Demezy on Twitter or whatever, and every single time you hear him talk, he talks about what he needs to get better at. Like he just has such a humility about him in interviews. And the thing that you never really know when you hear the interviews is, okay, is this guy just kind of talking because he thinks this sounds good, or is this actually what he believes? And what it sounds like is he's really shown himself over the first year to be a guy who, like that stuff that he says and he wants to get better and understanding his weaknesses and all those things, it sounds like he really believes that and really is working hard to overcome them. And I mean, if that's the case, he's got a lot of natural ability and he can shoot, Yeah. So, I mean,
and especially everybody who's pulling their hair out when Aaron Henry's going to the Final Four and getting serious minutes. And that's, who everybody was like, oh, we got Demezy instead of him. It was really easy to get even more negative about that. But I think it's something where it's about being a gym rat, right? Like that's how Victor got to where he is. And did you guys all read the article on Kawhi Leonard that got circulated around in the last few days about his time at San Diego State?
Oh man.
Just insane amount of work the guy put in. So that I think that's the only thing you can really get excited about is when you hear these other guys being like, yeah, he's just working his butt off because otherwise.
I'm just going to say this one, and I know there's all kinds of rules and it's not popular to talk about. Jerome Hunter's going to play. He's going to play.
Whoa.
I believe that.
I believe that.
Okay.
I believe it. Jerome Hunter's going to play.
This is Mr. Pessimism. Now, this is your hope or are you?
No. I mean, yes, of course it's my hope.
Oh, okay. Well, I just want to make sure.
But we've talked to several people that work out with him. The staff has to be conservative. They cannot say what they really feel. They have to be conservative because there's HIPAA laws and it's a condition and all that. But there is no one we've talked to who has even hesitated in telling us that Jerome is going to play. And when he does, it may not happen right away because he still has to adjust to this level. But that guy has the chance to be a stud. And I do think that Archie gave a tell at the Huber Farms thing. They asked him directly about Jerome, and he did the standard. I can't, we're months away. But then they asked Archie about three-point shooting, and Archie went down the list of why he thinks the team's going to be a better three-point shooting team. And he brought up Jerome very early and then caught himself and said, well, if he can play. I think everybody on that staff thinks he's going to play. I also think that's another reason why you're okay going with 11 scholarship players, which could be 10 if he doesn't play. Yeah. Now you're into a place where, my God, 10, if one guy is out, you don't have a good 5-on-5 scrimmage in practice. I think Jerome's going to play.
That part is somewhat convincing. That part right there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the success of this season will hinge on if Jerome's able to play and how much.
Yeah.
And he's another guy who seems like he is working his butt off, and people behind the scenes. I mean, Juwan told us he just went at Romeo defensively. He wanted Romeo.
To be the pessimist on that, I just wonder, clearly he's in good shape, right? He's in good shape. I just wonder, being out of competitive basketball for that long, how long does it take? If he can't even start being in scrimmages till August, September, it's not like Boogie coming back in January and having 10 plus years of being a stud under his belt. I'm hopeful for him to play this year and be part of the team going forward, but I can't get it into my mind to get excited about him contributing on the court this year.
Yeah, I actually have heard a couple of pessimistic things, but nothing definitive, obviously. But a lot of the circumstantial stuff kind of points to it, as you laid out, Eric. And I'm obviously optimistic. I guess I'm trying to kind of have a cautious optimism about it because I think he is so important to this team. But that's a great point where it's just because now the legend of Jerome Hunter has gotten so big, it's if he is cleared to play, everyone's going to be thinking, okay, here we go, 14, 15 points a game from Jerome. It's this guy hasn't played. He's still going to be a freshman. There's going to be growing pains for him too. So that'll,
Yeah. Look, 6'6", 6'7".
But he is a huge piece because he's the missing piece on next year's roster when you look at it. If you can pencil him in. Yeah, I mean.
No,
I hope he's. I mean, beyond what we want for IU basketball, for him just to be able to resume his career, I hope he's back. And that point that Juwan made about him being competitive, I remember an interview with him from his senior year where he went up against Darius Basley, who was the guy that was committed to Syracuse, ended up skipping college and going right to the G League. And they did an interview with Jerome, and he was just like, man, I wanted to go at him one-on-one. I love those mano-a-mano battles. I wanted him, and he ended up outplaying him. So I think he's got a little bit of that just kind of dog, I'm a badass in him.
Yeah, and I think that's
this program needs.
And I think that's what Archie wants to recruit. I mean, I think that's the kind of guy that Archie wants. And Andy, the other thing that I was going to say that made me more optimistic as we talked to current players is as the team was racking up losses and we were all getting depressed, there was a narrative behind the scenes that this team just didn't like each other. That there were lots of cliques on this team, and we all know the crazy rumors that surfaced. Look, these guys could be spinning a tale to us because who are we to talk to and why be honest? But I think we've got some pretty straight shooters on this team, and each one didn't hesitate to say that just wasn't true.
They were very convincing with their answers.
Yeah, right. They liked each other, and I believe them. I like to think I've got a good BS meter, and that makes me feel good that Archie is creating an environment where we have a team that does like each other, because that is important. I mean, that a team can be derailed if they don't. We got derailed last year for a lot of reasons, and you guys have done a great job analyzing all those reasons. But I don't think the fact that these guys didn't like each other was one of them. That was not an issue. And going forward, I like that Archie's creating an environment where you have guys who genuinely do like each other and want to fight for each other.
It is possible that when you lose 12 out of 13, they're I didn't like Andy and Ryan and we were losing 12 out of 13 games. You know what I mean? So it's possible that maybe they struggled at certain points, but that doesn't mean overall they weren't close. When you guys asked Juwan, he's like, that's the closest team I've been on. It's like, geez. That really kind of blew that narrative out of there. So, but that's why it's good getting that kind of insight, because you get message board stuff and you get, insiders telling you stuff and all this, and I'm sure some of it's true, but you
But
know,
when
we
we're
got to
talking-
remember, like, you don't really know unless you're actually in the locker room.
Right.
So
And at that point with him, though, I mean, there's no reason to downplay that. I mean, you're not there. It doesn't really matter. Like for him, there's no
Exactly.
benefit in it for him to kind of continue to cover up something that was there. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to say that it was bad, but you could kind of talk your way around the question or give half answers and just kind of be done to be able to move on to the next thing. Like there's really no, unless that's legitimate, there's really no reason for him to answer the question the way that he did.
I think the public discourse around the team was just so toxic. Everybody projected it onto the team.
I think you're right. I think I think on Andy, to your point, it's almost the opposite with Juwan. The guy's trying to make it to the NBA, and he had a pretty crappy team season in his senior year. If you want to find an excuse, hey, the team just fell apart because we had a bunch of rotten apples. It's not a bad narrative for him. I also loved what he said about Romeo at the end, that the narrative of Romeo not wanting to play in the NIT, he's like, no, guys, Romeo looked like he was in his 60s. He couldn't get out of bed. And Romeo wanted to fight for that team. And Juwan went to Romeo and said, don't do anything that's going to hurt yourself. We're your family. We know what you are and what you are to this team. Don't worry about anybody on the outside. I like that. I think that bodes well for the future. I just hope, the pessimistic side of me coming out, I hope that Archie has enough time to get the team right, to win enough games, to give him enough time to really turn it around, because this year's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Then you're in year 4, and the recruiting class in 2020 is going to be tough. I mean, there aren't right now, I don't think we're leading for any impact players in 2020. You know, everybody says that the key to recruiting these days and building a program is your best player on your team for next season better be on your team for this season.
Yeah, here's what I think, though, is that if we're talking about, does Archie need to be a top 10 team, and like we're on the court, you know, looking like the blue blood we all believe we still are, it's no. But like, can Archie by year 4 with these players he already has, to your point, Eric, and even if he doesn't get Christian Lander, you know, but he gets top 100 guys from the States, guys who fit his system and fit each other. If by the end of year 4, we're a top 25 team that's definitely in the tournament and in the top 4 or 5 in the Big Ten, I think, and I really believe he'll get us there. Then we're looking, maybe it'll take another 2, 3, 4 years for it to start to coalesce into like, okay, now we're all the way back. And I think Sampson was going to do it really fast. And Crean, even though he started out with a bare cupboard, he actually got us to number 1 pretty fast. But as we saw with both of those were house of cards that ultimately collapsed faster and slower in 2 cases. But is Archie building the thing that will last for 20 or 30 years? Maybe it takes 7 or 8 to get back to that final place. I mean, look, because I'm okay in year 4 or 5 if we're definitely in the tournament, and we're going to be next year because of all the guys that are coming back. That will buy me more patience.
Yeah, I don't know if in year 4 and 5, if all he's doing is getting to the tournament and not landing the top guys in Indiana.
He's already doing
that.
No, but you said if he what if he doesn't get Christian Lander? He's got to continue to get the top guys in Indiana. He's got to get enough of them.
I'm not saying he does worse than what he's already doing, but he got Trace and Romeo. He didn't get Keon. We'll take 2 out of 3 5.
Yeah, no, I agree. And 2020, I hope he gets Galloway and Leal, or at least one of them.
Agreed.
And 2021 is the big class. I really do think I've talked to Jeff Rabjohns about this off our podcast. That 2021 class is special. And with Lander and First and Trey Kaufman. And Kaufman may be better than First and more upside.
I've had several people compare him to Jerod Jeffries.
Yes, he's got the same build. They've got roughly the same type of games, both good athletes, good size. That's a big time class in the state. And I think Archie's got to do very well in that class with the continued progression of the on-the-court product, because I don't think the patience runs beyond season 5. I don't. If things aren't really progressing.
Yeah, I agree. And that's fair. That's perfectly fair. I mean,
you should be able to do it in 5 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, guys, this was awesome. We're going to need to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. You got to come on ours, though. We got to
This is
take we got to take 3.5 hours to talk to you guys about your backgrounds and not have to worry about times.
When did you know you wanted to do podcasting?
Oh man.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
We'll do it. We'll definitely do it. Thanks so much.
Okay.
I've said this on Twitter a bunch. You guys are the gold standard in IU podcasts, and you are a huge reason why we have had any success because of how supportive you were to us when you had no reason to be at the beginning. So I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I would defer gold standard to Galen Clavio and Crimson Cast because they've been around for a long time. And, people like him were really helpful to us when we got started. Like, it was huge for us to build an audience that people like him, that, Chronic Hoosier would came on our show like the second season and would retweet it, and it's only right when you see someone doing great work to share it. I mean, that's our philosophy has always been not necessarily, we're not like competing for, with all the other podcasters. We're just trying to give our audience the best stuff, and you guys are doing the best stuff, so we want to share it with them. So I think it all works out better when it's like that.
Although we do want some of that SeatGeek money. I mean, come on, we gotta get some of that SeatGeek money, right, Warren?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, Ryan's hogging all the SeatGeek money. We'd like to see some of that SeatGeek money.
Absolutely.
By the way, Andy, I got to give you a shout out too on the bracketology stuff, man. I don't know how you do that. I don't get it, but I love following your stuff. You were my guy during the tournament leading up to it. So great work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I like your list you've got behind you.
Oh yeah.
I think I've been able to make out.
Were you able to read some of it?
I've been able to make out most of them as I was there.
What
is it? It's my IU bucket list. So it's sixth banner. Yes. Number 2 is make Archie laugh. Number 3 is get on assembly call. So we can cross that one off.
Check.
Number 4 is change Ward's song.
I will tell you that I listen to podcasts like it's so funny.
From the halls of assembly, you'll hear us scream and shout. I love Indiana.
Jared's my guy. Jared is my guy.
I will tell you that I typically
custom music.
I listen to podcasts at up above the normal speed. Like I think it's like 1 1/4 speed or whatever. That as Jerod played it, that's literally the first time that I've ever heard it at its actual tempo, and I'm like, man, this is a lot slower than what it usually is when I listen. So I get a more kind of like jazzy version of it when it's really more
caffeinated.
I'm glad to get a different experience of the whole thing.
Yeah, because what you're saying, Andy, is it sucks.
That is not what I said.
Oh, okay, all right. That's what I've heard.
Maybe you should try listening to it a little bit faster, and maybe you'll get a different opinion.
From the hall.
Yep. Yeah.
I want to make one point about what you guys do because it's super obvious in the off season, but it's also the case during the actual season. Eric and I talk about how much being an Indiana basketball fan, we watch Indiana basketball less than 100 hours a year, right? It just watching the games ends up being much less time than you actually want to spend in that world. So to be able to get in and hear you guys and your guests talking for hours a week, it's just a mind space you want to be. I don't want to think about real life and bills and and what I got to do when I get out of the car. I just like to be in this safe, happy space. Well, sometimes it's a sad, negative space because that's where our program's at. But misery loves company, and you guys are great company for so much of the year when there isn't a game to actually make us crazy.
Thank you. I mean, I kind of feel like that's what we all do for each other. That's why it's great having so many options to listen to, because you're right. It's nice sometimes to just get away. And even if it's, mid-June analysis of lineups that who knows if it'll ever be relevant. Like, it's still in the moment when you're listening, it's like, this is really good. This is, this is the most important thing to listen to right now. So
I also think one of the most fun things to do now for me in listening to Jerod on any of your podcasts is to pick up when you're taking a dig at a certain radio broadcaster without saying his name. I really enjoy that. I enjoy trying to find it. Like when you were talking about Don Fisher the other day. That was a good one. That was a subtle one.
Yeah.
I like that. I won't mention the name, but I
Indianapolis's number one radio host, Dan Dockich.
Look, I know you will disagree with me on this, Jerod. We would love to have Dockich on our show. We would love to talk to him. Do we lose Jerod?
That's it.
Whoa.
You
Sorry.
broke Jerod.
That was a really interesting time for that to freeze up.
Yeah, it was. My internet connection is unstable, it says. So if I cut out, that's why.
No, I think it would be, I mean, in all seriousness, I think it would be good. I mean, he's a good storyteller, knows a lot of background stuff. Like, I think you'd get a lot of good information.
Yeah, it'd be fun. We'll see if it happens. We're trying.
Okay, so wait, I missed that. What was the...
I was saying...
Were you saying try to get Dakich on an interview?
I would love to have him on our show, yeah. I think he'd be a fun interview.
Well, there's not a chance in hell of him coming on this show, so I would... Much better for it to be on your show.
Yeah.
No, I have a good friend who will remain nameless who has been a part of the Indiana sports broadcasting scene for a very long time. And he, like, just out of nowhere, I will get texts from him saying, stay away from Dakich. Whatever you do, don't talk to that guy. Just like, and I'm like, look, we just want the ears. We just want the ears that he'll bring to the program. We'll see how it goes. You know, I mean, yeah, he drives me crazy like anybody else. And it really bothers me to have that kind of negativity coming from somebody that closely tied to the program. But I mean, for a couple hours, we'll see how it goes.
Also, is he the only, I can't believe I don't know this off the top of my head, but is he the only person that ever was a player, assistant coach, and head coach for Indiana University?
Well, let's see. Branch was a player and a head coach.
Yeah, I don't think
was he ever an assistant?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he probably was.
Yeah.
I mean, look, he's got more stories and experience and insight, and you know, I mean, he knows a lot. That's for sure. So I mean, if you got him in the right frame of mind, you know, where he put some of his agenda aside and just actually talked for real,
right,
then I think it'd be fantastic. You know,
here's what I know: he's the only player, assistant coach, director of basketball operations, and head coach in Indiana University history.
Yes,
that we can say with certainty. Yeah. So who's at the top of your kind of former player wish list at this point of guys you'd really want to get on?
Well, because we said Cody would be on the Mount Rushmore of like who we would currently want to get. So if we're looking for like three others, obviously Vic. If you want to talk about the combination of like a great Indiana player and what kind of significance he would have to an audience, Vic is there. I think the window has closed on Coach Knight, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really want Steve Alford, and I really want Isaiah Thomas, and I really want Scott May and Quinn Buckner from 76. Those
getting those guys' stories would be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to Kent Benson. I really enjoyed that. Laskowski was awesome, but I really want Quinn and Scott from that team. I really want Alford from 87, and I really want Isaiah from 81. I mean, those guys cut down the nets, and we're the reason we cut down the nets. So, to me, that's...
I did just...
Keith Smart would be great, too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just read something about Keith Smart. I think he's an assistant with the Knicks now. And, you know, he was out at Golden State for a long time, and he's just had a pretty incredible life after that shot. So I think there's a guy who... And did he come back and talk to the team last year or something, too? Like, I think so. Still has a lot of love for the program.
Also, Alan Henderson and Damon Bailey. Both.
Yes.
I mean, those...
Yeah, that would be good.
Here's a question for you.
Jay Edwards would be another good one. He's got some stories to tell. Sharon Wilkerson would also be good.
That's a good point on Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't thought about Sharon, but Jay we're trying on. I really would love to talk to Jay. We haven't done it yet, and Ward and I have not spent a lot of time talking about this. At some point, I wouldn't mind talking to a rival. Yeah. I think it would be fun to talk to a guy that we really hated.
Gene Cady. One of the nicest guys that you could ever meet.
Yeah, I've thought about it.
What about Jimmy Jackson?
Oh,
he'd be good if you could get him.
Yeah,
Jerod walked up to him before as we were going into the Michigan State game. We happened to get over there as like Jimmy Jackson was getting ready to go into the game to do the broadcast, and I forget what you say to him. You're like,
I just want you to know that I hated you when I was growing up.
Oh, Jerod.
I was like, I mean it as respectfully as possible, but I hated you.
Well, it was nice. We had a nice couple like minute interaction with him. It was good, but it was.
He looked at me like I might be a stalker, like right at the beginning, and then he was okay after that.
I swear,
he was trying to check and see if he could see the outline of a gun in your waistband.
Okay. I swear to God, this is the absolute truth. I met Jimmy Jackson in Los Angeles about year and a half, 2 years ago. We were in the same room at this thing, and I went up to him and I said, "My name's Eric Pankowski. I just want you to know, I hate you.
He must get that so much from other
And
fans.
he looked at me and he goes, "You went to Indiana, didn't you?" And we had a great conversation about college basketball. I will tell you what he told me at the time. He really praised. It was maybe more than 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He praised Coach Crean's player development.
Yeah,
he talked about that. He praised his player development.
Well, and look at those guys out in the league now. And I think that's something Archie is really going to benefit from, is like, oh yeah, did you see OG? Yeah, it's too bad his appendix burst, but that's an IU guy playing in the finals, along with, how many other guys are populated now compared to even in Knight's time, and maybe it was less important then, but for when these guys are coming in the door, and soon Archie's going to have Romeo in the league, and hopefully he will get a few of his own guys in there, which will be even more impactful. But for right now, just to say we got some Hoosiers on these rosters around the league, I think that's something we are still in Coach Crean's debt for.
Yeah, man. I'm just, there's so many. There's a bunch of other ideas here in the chat for people that you guys should interview. Landon Turner obviously would be incredible.
That would be great.
Brian Cardinal, Bracy Wright, Rex Chapman, Robbie Hummel, Mike Woodson, Jalen Rose, all names that were thrown out.
There's only a couple there that I wouldn't want to do. I would love to do Jalen. I think he'd be a fun interview.
Jalen's a real, as far as somebody I look up to as a podcaster, Jalen and Jacoby is like, I could watch that all day. I could watch, because of he's like, obviously he has a very informed opinion, but it's also a very unique one. He's just always coming at things from a different angle. That's quite intelligent, and it helps me change the way I look at the game or a player.
Jerod and Andy, if you could pick one player that you would love to hear us interview, or anybody associated with Indiana, who would it be?
That you haven't done already, because Calvert was the obvious choice.
Yeah. Part 2's coming, don't worry.
That's right.
Good.
I would go with Larry Richardson. That would be
Scary Larry.
Scary Larry. Jeff Newton is the guy that I would love to hear you interview. Because his time at Indiana was so great, and then his career, he became like the greatest player ever in Japan. It would be so interesting. Yeah, it would be so interesting to hear what that was like. So he would be great. And he and AJ are still close, aren't they?
All of them. Jerod, AJ, and George Leach, and all those guys are very close. That's another thing that you do realize when you talk to these guys. There's a reason those teams were great.
Yeah.
There's a reason those teams had success. And that's why I get so excited about guys who genuinely like each other. Because we've also talked to some guys, and we talked to Colin Hartman, who talked about a couple of his teams where he said the leadership was just bad. Those guys aren't on text chains. And that was just a few years ago.
And he said he was still salty about Coach Crean. Colin's kind of been the one guy that's come on, and he spanned both eras. So I thought that was really interesting. But that he was the first one that kind of not mince words about that era. Because I think to a certain degree, like, they're still like, oh, should we have given Crean more time? If OG hadn't gotten hurt, maybe. Just, I don't believe that, but we all have those dark moments when we're alone.
Especially when we're trudging through scoring 50 points against Nebraska at home. That's when you really have those moments. maybe an all-offense team wasn't so bad.
Yeah, but you just come back to, you're so right. But you just come back to, he lost the state, period. The state hated him.
It was not going to get better.
No, and I couldn't stand watching him pull up those pants anymore. I couldn't do it. I couldn't take it. I was over it. It was over. Couldn't do that. I couldn't do a fake tan in December in Bloomington. I can't do that for our head coach.
I was going to say that it would be interesting for you guys to interview him, maybe with more time elapsed, but it's somewhat difficult still listening. It's interesting when he's not talking at a press conference, actually, and he's just analyzing basketball. He's great. I just fear talking about it, not that he would do an interview about Indiana, but it would go back into all the defensive stuff and not really taking accountability for anything. So it probably wouldn't be that interesting now. Maybe when he's done.
Maybe, but that guy is an insecure guy who reads every negative comment about himself. I just don't think it would be that satisfying. I will tell you a guy that I really want to interview, Mike Davis.
Yes.
I would.
He's
love,
an amazing guy.
Yes,
That was one I
great
thought of.
guy. I would love. I mean, that guy got put through the ringer and didn't deserve any of it. And by the way, I'm sure I said horrible things about him at the time too, but he never even contemplated being the head coach of Indiana University.
Yeah, but see this, I'm not sure he's as innocent in all that as the more common narrative would have. Like was this not somebody we talked to together? I'm trying to pull it up. It's somewhere in the last couple months. Somebody's like, no, Davis wanted the job. He was positioning himself for the job. He was not the assistant coach who stepped back and said, you take the job. Like he wanted.
Well, I mean, he had an opportunity to get it. I wouldn't begrudge him that.
No, but Ward, my point is he did not come to Indiana and accept an assistant coach job at Indiana University with the thought in his mind that I just got to wait out my time till Bobby Knight leaves and I'm going to be the head coach. That was
you
never
don't know that. You
thought.
don't know. You
No,
don't
I
know
do.
that, and I doubt it. I doubt it because when Bobby was,
you're wrong.
But when he came there,
on record,
there was no, like, you couldn't even see the end of the Bob Knight tenure, like, on the horizon, though.
No,
so I struggle to think that he would be thinking that, though.
No, it was that. And by the way, you've listened to Mike Davis talk about it. And he talks about he took the job at Indiana because it was a great assistant coach job that he hoped would be a springboard to getting a head coaching job at a place like Texas Southern, where he ended up landing at the end before coming back to Detroit.
The weirdest coaching career of anybody.
He talked about, and that's why I love him. I think it'd be really interesting because he talked about his coaching career went backwards by accident. He went to Indiana as an assistant coach to get the experience to springboard him into a low-level Division I head coaching job. And then circumstances threw him into the biggest job, let's just say one of the top 5 biggest jobs in the country. And then he slid backwards because he wasn't ready. And then he kind of hit bottom at Texas Southern, figured things out a little bit, and now got to step up at Detroit. That kind of perspective would be really fascinating to kind of explore with him.
You know who else would be a great interview is Marco Killingsworth. I've heard some interviews with him, and he is really candid. So to actually go a couple hours with Marco Killingsworth, that'd be pretty good.
I forget what it was. There was another podcast.
I think it was was it a Dockage conversation with him?
No,
maybe it wasn't that.
Else. I don't know if it was like Query and Schultz, maybe.
Yes, that's what it was. Query and Schultz.
They used to did like a series where they had one with him. All right, I gotta run.
Yeah,
we'd ask him why he lost the dunk competition.
Nice. All right, well, thanks guys for joining us. Great talking to you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
Keep up the good work. I got the Laskowski one queued up for my work day tomorrow. So.
Oh, nice. Very good. Let us know how you like it.
All right, we'll do. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
See you, Jerod.
Bye. Take care.
Bye,
Good
Jerod.
to meet
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Hopefully,
You
we
too,
get to
man.
meet in person one of these days.
Yeah, we should try to coordinate a Bloomington trip. That would be fun.
Yeah, we do one every year. So.
Well, let's talk about it because we're going to do an event in Bloomington with a live podcast.
We're going to try and do the same thing. So we try and do it
talk.
together.
Let's talk.
Okay. That'd be awesome.
Take care.
All right. See you guys. See you, everybody. See you next week. Okay. All right.